Welcome to 2022. This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of January 3rd, first one of the year. And the subject this week is the CES show. CES, by the way, does not stand for anything. It used to stand for Consumer Electronics Show, and now it just kind of stands for CES. That's the way of the world, my friends. The CES show is back in person for 22 after a 1-year absence. The folks at CES are quick to tell you that they did hold a show in 21 and that it was all online and that it was successful. They did hold a show and it was all online. That's all I'm going to say. One thing that really came out of the 21 show that was great is that the keynotes are now available online. And so anybody can attend if they want to. I've never been much of a keynote kind of person, but I did attend a few of them in 21 just to see what was up. Most of them were pre-recorded. The smaller ones were basically Zoom meetings, and that's as good as we were going to get in early 21. Well, now in 22 we're back. And the keynotes, some are going to be pre-recorded and online only. I understand there are going to be some that are going to be in person. And the show floor is open. They're calling it a hybrid event. Hybrid event means that they're going to have what appears to be the same kind of show floor experience they had last year, which was basically what I called a 2006 MySpace type experience where every exhibitor just gets a page and they can put whatever they want on it. And they are also going to have in-person exhibits. It still remains to be seen how many in-person exhibits there are going to be. Some big people have already gone online only as a result of, the way the world works today. And I'm talking about some of the big exhibitors, Google and Amazon and LG and Microsoft. And I'm sure I'm missing a few, but the big names, General Motors is another one. The big names that were taking up huge amounts of space in the 2020 show are online only this year. And, I'd say that those companies made a decision that was best for them, for their employees, and for the future. And for those other companies that have decided to stay on site, well, that's totally cool too. It's it's up to them to do so. This is a very interesting time of year, and I don't tend to get into politics in this blog. So since I'm not a doctor and I'm not a politician, there isn't a whole lot more for me to say there. It's just that the show is open. What I can say, however, is that I kind of wonder what the show floor is going to look like. CES officials have said that only about 10% of exhibitors have dropped out. I'm assuming that's 10% by number and not by floor space, as some of the really big ones have. I'll come back and say that if I were a smaller exhibitor, I might not be telling the CES people that I wasn't planning to show up. I just might not show up, and that just might be the way it is. So it remains to be seen, and we will find out in the next couple of days exactly what the show floor looks like. I'm going to predict that there's going to be a lot of open space, that it probably will be a pretty safe place to be in the sense that they have really good air filtration in place. And I'm expecting personally less than 1/4 of the attendance that they had of the 2020 show. CES and I have always had a rather interesting relationship with those attendance numbers because CES has officially been growing every single year, and they claim they peaked out at 170,000 people at their 2020 show. And yet, if you look back at some of the articles I've posted on the Solid Signal blog, I was able to show consistently that the show floor just got quieter and quieter and quieter every year, starting about 2016 or 2017. It became easier to get taxis and Ubers and Lyfts. The show floor just wasn't as crowded. There wasn't as much really excitement there. And it kind of brings up the question that I ask every year this time for the last 5 years or so, which is, what is the show's future really about? It's there for profit. It's there to make money for the folks that put it on, and it's there to support the city of Las Vegas. There was a time, and I want to say it was 2013 or 2014, something like that, when the story was all over town that CES was going to move out of Las Vegas. And then the following year, as I remember it, Some of you may prove me wrong with facts, which I will support, and I will definitely retract anything that's wrong. But the way I remember it is that a new organization, the CTA, took over the CES show and immediately signed a new deal with the city of Las Vegas to continue to host the show there. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the real answer to why that is. But I think that there was a feeling even as early as 2012 that the show had already peaked. The years 2010, 2011 were really bad for the show. You might remember that was a tough year and a half or so for the economy, and the idea that people were interested in big flashy consumer electronics was not the first thing on their minds. So there was that feeling that the show had already peaked, that online was really a better way to go, and that it might be shrinking from then on. Well, it did. It bounced back, which is great. And it stayed in Las Vegas, which is also great. But I think it really only had a couple of years left before it started to shrink in earnest again. And so we have to ask ourselves, and I think there's a great question, will CES ever return to its pre-pandemic peaks? I think not, because it was already on the decline before then. Will the CES show continue to be relevant? I will say less and less every year. The big names, Samsung, Samsung, LG is what I really meant to say, and others who were at the very front of the central hall, seemed to put less and less effort into innovating every year and put fewer and fewer new products out there, instead showing just prototypes and stuff that they'd already announced in an attempt to just get some media coverage. The real fun of CES shifted over to the South Hall at the time, because that's where the smaller vendors were, the people who are still striving to get your attention at that show. And it's where a lot of our business associates were in those days. And it's where I spent an awful lot of my time in meetings in those days. I think the show has changed permanently, for better or worse. I think this is the time to really say, okay, the flashy trade show experience has ended. And some of that is for the better. Again, this is not one of those blogs where we talk about politics or lifestyles or things like that. But in days past, even getting into the early 2000s, CES was very much the kind of trade show that we talk about from the 20th century. A lot of scantily clad women and a lot of people getting drunk and a lot of things happening that were semi-legal or not quite legal, or the things that you might not want to tell the folks back home. It was that kind of show. And it's not that kind of show anymore. And it's okay that it's not that kind of show anymore. The world has changed. That's just not the kind of show that any of us want to really have anymore. And the new show is really more business oriented. But for those people who wanted, a 5-day party and nothing more than getting drunk and debauchery and all of that stuff, then the CES show isn't that anymore. And I don't think any show is that anymore. And like I said, world's moved on from that. And I think there's a lot that you can say about how that's for the better. But you ask yourself, if there are not going to be any big product announcements from major corporations, if there isn't a need to have that meeting space because we can all do it remotely now using video, I think we've all proven that. And if there isn't the party aspect that there once was, exactly why is it that there is a CES? And that is the bottom line. We'll find out this year who goes. The Solid Signal blog is going to have boots on the ground this year. This will be the first year that we have more people on site than Engadget, because they're not coming at all. And in the past, I've made fun of Engadget because they bring a bus full of people and major coverage. And this year we're bringing one person, and they're bringing no people. So there you go. So we'll have a photo essay on what the show floor really looks like in midday. We'll have impressions of what's really out there. And after that, I think that if we're going to look forward to the 23 show, there's going to be a 23 show because there's contracts to fulfill. And I don't think that that's going to completely disappear. But what is it going to look like? That's the real question. If I had to guess today, I'd say it would continue to be smaller, continue to focus more on keynotes than the show floor experience, and hopefully they manage to create some sort of online experience that's a little better. I say again, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, I said this in 21 and I'll say this again, this would have been a perfect opportunity for the folks at Meta to really sponsor a VR show floor experience where you could just kind of walk from place to place and see where you're going. They could have taken a day like the media day and done all of the pre-work so that they had all the show floor experience already set up. Maybe it wouldn't have been the right choice because if we find out that, half or more of the exhibitors aren't there, you don't want to see that. But I think a VR show floor experience is a good idea and they should do more of it. And maybe we'll see that in 23. World's got a lot of change to do before then. I think we've all got a lot of healing to do before then, and we're all looking forward to getting back to something like normal. But in the meantime, that's about it for this podcast. A word about the length of these podcasts. They're getting longer, and I know it. And I think not only our podcasts, but our YouTube videos are getting longer. And that's because you folks have told us that's what you want to see. But leave a comment. Tell us if you like the longer podcasts, if they really work out better for you, if you end up listening to all of them. I get some analytics that suggest that more than 2/3 of you listen all the way through, but they're not complete analytics. So if you're bored and you tune out, let me know. Leave a comment. Let's try that one more time. Leave a comment anywhere that you get this podcast. Like and subscribe always makes me look good to my boss, and I will see you all next week.